Before we begin this video, I wanted to give a big shout out to Eddie Perez. He commented on our last Subban video and brought to my attention this idea that was so absurd that just 5 days after talking about the Subban Canucks thing, I just had to talk about this Subban Oilers thing, because the factors of this little story over here, compared to the Canucks story we had a few days ago, in my opinion, is so much more spectacular because of how things could have turned out. Today we're talking about PK Subban once again, and another hypothetical trade that was on the horizon, but just didn't end up coming to fruition. Now, in order to talk about this, let's go back to the day Subban was traded. June 29th, 2016. This was the day that the hockey world imploded, because within the span of about half an hour, we had three very big pieces of NHL news. First off, the Montreal Canadiens traded PK Subban. They traded him to the Nashville Predators in exchange for Shea Weber. Second off, the Taylor Hall trade went down, where the Oilers sent Taylor Hall 1-for-1 for Adam Larsson from the New Jersey Devils. And thirdly, Steven Stamkos re-signed with the Tampa Bay Lightning, shutting down all rumors that he was coming to Toronto. But two of those teams that we talked about in that little span apparently were also involved too. Let's talk today about how Leon Draisaitl almost became a Montreal Canadien and how PK Subban almost went the other way. Now, in order to get this topic fully dissected, I am bringing up this article here from EdmontonJournal.com. This article was written in January of 2017, was the best Oilers deal last summer, the one that Chiarelli refused to make. So, based off of the timelines, the Subban and Hall trades were just under a year old when this article was published. The article talks about that day that we talked about, where the Subban trade happened and the Hall trade happened. However, it tries to tie in both of these stories together, and it starts off with this paragraph over here. It's unclear today if the Oilers ever had a massive amount of interest in PK Subban of the Habs, who instead was dealt to Nashville for Shea Weber. It is clear, however, that the two teams had talks, that Montreal's ask was steep, but that most Oilers fans and observers were exceedingly keen that such a deal was speaking itself into existence. Now, skipping a few lines down, that enthusiasm of the deal was there, even as the Oilers were to give up a huge amount for Subban, starting with 21-year-old center Leon Draisaitl. Now, that right there is kind of an indicator that the Edmonton fanbase was very interested in a Draisaitl for Subban-like trade. We will get into just how interested they were in this later in this video. The next part of this article talks about why Chiarelli turned down the Subban trade. And the reason we're talking about it like this is because TSN insiders, ESPN guys, and Sportsnet's Elliotte Friedman eventually did say, yeah, the Habs asked for a package for Subban from Edmonton. Sportsnet's Elliotte Friedman said the ask from Edmonton was the 4th overall pick, Draisaitl, and more than that, maybe a player like Oscar Klefbom. Edmonton has just not been willing to do that. I think the big game of chicken today is Montreal GM Marc Bergevin and Peter Chiarelli. You know, I think Edmonton would love to have Subban, but I think they've looked at the price at being overly unrealistic. That 4th overall pick was the one in the 2016 NHL Entry Draft, the same draft that we talked about where the Montreal Canadiens were really interested in Pierre-Luc Dubois, the guy who eventually went 3rd overall and the guy who could become a number 1 center if the Habs drafted him. But Dubois wasn't available at that number 4 spot. And is that what killed the Subban to Edmonton deal? Evidently not. What killed the deal mostly was Chiarelli's lack of interest. Later on, Friedman reveals that the Oilers, while indeed interested, they just didn't want to do it because of the monetary reasons. Subban was just coming off of a big contract extension, and as a result, the Oilers were kind of straight away from that. Instead, they went with Adam Larsson, who, even though he's not as good as Subban, was way cheaper than Subban, and they didn't have to get rid of their fourth pick, Leon Draisaitl, or any of their Clefbaum or Nurse pieces as well. Now, they wanted to save money here, which is why they didn't do the Subban trade. But let's talk about how the fans reacted to this. The next part of this article is so absurd that this is the meat and potatoes of the content in this video here. Let's take a look at the public opinion of the Subban deal. There was a poll ran by the Cult of Hockey asking, would you trade Leon Draisaitl and the 4th overall pick, which turned out to be Jesse Puljujarvi, whose value was through the roof back then, for PK Subban? 72% said yes, because it makes sense for the Oilers. Think about that for a second. Leon Draisaitl and the 4th overall pick for one PK Subban is a trade that 72% of Oilers fans at the time would have made. Nowadays, taking a look at how PK Subban's career has declined and how Leon Draisaitl is in the conversation for the 2nd or 3rd best hockey player in the world, oh boy, what an interesting little idea there. Here is what Mark Spector had to say about this. If you have a chance to land a true number 1 defenseman, in this case it's PK Subban, to work with Connor McDavid, you can't let that get away, even if the cost is steep. That truly would be a blockbuster trade, with the Oilers' number 4 overall pick and young center Leon Draisaitl rumored to be the asking price. Montreal may be asking for a defenseman like Clefbaum, but that price would be too rich for Edmonton, unless the Habs included their 9th overall pick. Perhaps. Edmonton lacks either a number 1 or number 2 blue liner, so this is something Chiarelli can't afford to pass up, especially when one assumes the Oilers might not have another top 5 draft pick to peddle for years to come. Sticking with the Edmonton Journal, there was this other article posted a day after the trades were made, saying why the Oilers should have made the Subban trade, not the Hall trade. And in this article, they talk about the same trade package: Leon Draisaitl, the number 4th overall pick, and one of Oscar Clefbaum or Darnell Nurse, as well as something of not insignificant value. This article here talks about how the Subban trade should have happened, and how Oilers fans should have been treated to PK Subban in exchange for that package that we just listed. If things worked out that way, then Leon Draisaitl would have been a Hab. Leon Draisaitl, who had 100 points last year, he had 100 points this year, was the only guy to get 100 points this year, and has really blossomed into a player of his own. A guy who isn't carried by McDavid, a guy who, when McDavid is injured for 10-something games, can still produce at a crazy elite level, and who is looking to dominate the NHL for years and years to come. Because the Oilers wanted to save up on a little bit of money, they didn't trade Draisaitl to Montreal. Now, that is crazy. Absolutely crazy. Imagine what things would have been like had that been the case. PK Subban and Connor McDavid would have been one story, but my goodness, Leon Draisaitl coming over to Montreal? This city would implode. Imagine if the Canadiens had the Art Ross winner, or at least projected winner, for this year. The fan base would absolutely explode with excitement, and I don't know if anybody would have been able to contain that. So Habs fans, comment down below your thoughts about this little idea. How would you have felt about this trade if it was made? The 4th and Draisaitl for Subban? Remember, back then, Draisaitl wasn't seen as this 100-point potential player like he is today. He was just seen as a normal number 1 center guy. He just really exploded as the years went on, and we really are seeing the benefits of long-term development with this kind of player today. And Oilers fans, I know there's a lot of you out there watching this. Knowing what Subban was able to do immediately with the Predators, take them to the Stanley Cup Finals and be one of the best players in the league at that time frame, would you have done that? Especially with the way Draisaitl has been looking now. I think I kind of know the answer, but I want to see what you guys are saying as well. So I hope you enjoyed this video. So that 99, and bye.